She laughed when she said I was useless. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't explain herself. She laughed the way someone comments on the weather. In that moment, I understood that it wasn't an isolated insult. It wasn't a poorly chosen phrase. It was something that had been said before, just not in front of me. What cut through me wasn't the word. It was the silence that came after it. No one moved. No one looked uncomfortable. My husband looked away, like someone who already knows the script. If you've ever been diminished inside your own home, if you've ever felt the weight of a silence that pushes you out without anyone needing to touch you, stay with me until the end. Stay with me because this story isn't about shouting or revenge. It's about the exact moment when you realize you've been erased and decide not to accept that alone anymore. And I stayed seated at the table as if I were still part of the conversation. They were talking, not to me, about me. They talked about decisions, about plans, about things that directly affected my life, as if I were a technical detail, not a person. My body reacted before my mind. Cold hands, a sinking feeling in my stomach. I waited just for a few seconds for someone to say anything. That's not quite like that. I think you crossed a line. Nothing. Their silence was old, practiced, far too comfortable. And then I realized something else, even crueler. My last name was never said. Not once. They used only my husband's name, as if I didn't have a history of my own, as if everything I built, everything I signed, everything I supported could be summed up as just sitting there, silent. In that moment, a dangerous thought crossed my mind. What if this is really how they've seen me for years? What if I've been slowly removed without noticing? That doubt didn't last long, but it lasted long enough to hurt deeply. Before we continue, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who's also been silenced. And tell me in the comments, what city are you listening from? And have you ever lived through something like this inside your own family? When I entered that family, I thought I was arriving carefully. It wasn't insecurity, it was manners. I had spent my entire life handling things on my own, so I believed the right thing to do was not to take up too much space right away. In the beginning, my name was said in full, first and last name. I noticed that because I've always noticed, not out of empty pride, but because my name carried history, work, hard decisions, sacrifices that didn't fit into lunch conversation. I spoke little. I observed a lot. I always believed that arriving slowly was a sign of maturity. I didn't want to be seen as someone who imposed herself. I wanted to be accepted. Today I know I confused acceptance with respect. I made a point of not being a burden. If I needed something, I handled it myself. If something bothered me, I thought twice before speaking. If I disagreed, I swallowed it. I told myself that was coexistence, that with time, things would adjust. But time passed, and the adjustment never came. Small situations started repeating themselves. Comments framed as jokes, always pointing in the same direction. Invitations that arrived too late. Decisions already made by the time I sat at the table. Laughter that didn't include me. And I always wondered if I was exaggerating. My husband helped sustain that doubt without realizing it, or maybe realizing it too well. That's just how they are. You take things too seriously. It's not worth creating tension. And I believed him, because believing was more comfortable than admitting I was being slowly pushed out of the center of my own life. I clearly remember the first time I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. We were all together, and someone told an old story, a story I lived, a story I helped build, My name didn't come up once. The story was attributed only to him. At the time, I felt something strange, a quick discomfort, but I let it go. I thought it wasn't important. I thought it wasn't worth correcting. That was my mistake. Because every silence of mine became permission. Every swallowed discomfort became a rule. They learned they could decide without me, speak for me, cut through me without consequence. Over time, I started taking up less space without realizing it. I spoke less, gave fewer opinions, explained myself before anyone even questioned me. I became smaller, believing that would bring peace. And it did. Peace for them. Today, looking back, I see with frightening clarity, it didn't start the day they called me useless. That was the final step of something that had been rehearsed for years. And the hardest part to admit wasn't their contempt. It was realizing how much I myself adapted to fit into a space that kept getting smaller. When that word was spoken, it didn't fall out of nowhere. It landed on ground that had already been prepared, ground where I had almost started to believe that maybe I was exaggerating, maybe I was too sensitive. That doubt, silent, treacherous, almost made me give up before I even understood what was happening. But something was already moving inside me, and I didn't know it yet. But that past was about to demand an explanation.
I found out about the meeting without anyone needing to tell me. The voices were different, lower. The tone wasn't casual conversation, it was decision-making. I was in the kitchen when I noticed this strange movement in the living room. Papers on the table, chairs pulled closer, a mood that hadn't existed minutes earlier. I understood too quickly. That meeting wasn't for me. It was about me. I approached slowly, without interrupting. My name came up once, short, without a last name, and then disappeared. They talked about numbers, deadlines, choices, all of it with a disconcerting ease. I asked what was going on. The silence came down hard. Someone said it was something simple. Someone else said I didn't need to worry. My husband, without looking at me, said we'd talk later. Later never comes when it matters. They kept talking as if I'd left the room. My body reacted before my mind. My face burned, my chest tightened. Even so, I sat down. No one pulled out a chair for me. That's when she said it. Useless. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive. It was calm, almost polite, like someone stating the obvious. Useless for this kind of decision, she added, looking at the table, not at me. The word landed and stayed. I waited. 1 second. 2. My husband adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, said nothing. That was the point of no return, because I understood that the purpose of that meeting was clear: to decide my life without me, to decide money, authority, future, to decide where I fit or whether I still did. I asked why I hadn't been invited. They said I was being emotional, that I was misunderstanding, that it was too technical, too practical. Practical for whom? My body was shaking, but my voice wasn't, and that seemed to bother them more than if I'd cried. I looked at the papers on the table. I recognized numbers, amounts I had paid, things I had supported when no one else wanted to take responsibility. My name wasn't there. I pointed that out. They exchanged quick looks, that silent conversation that excludes without a word. Someone laughed nervously and said, "You're not needed for this kind of thing anymore." That's when something almost broke inside me. For 1 second, just one, I thought about backing down, pretending I hadn't heard, standing up and leaving so it wouldn't get worse. That old doubt came back strong. What if I'm exaggerating? But it passed. It passed because I saw it. I saw the calculation. I saw the certainty that I would accept it. I stood up slowly, my legs weak but steady enough. I didn't make a speech.
I didn't ask for explanations, I just said I needed some air. No one followed me. In the kitchen, my hands were shaking, not from fear, from clarity. I remembered every bill I paid, every hard decision I'd made, every night I solved problems alone so I wouldn't be a burden. That wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an execution, slow, polite, socially acceptable. When I came back to grab my bag, they had already changed the subject. Another plan, another decision, as if I'd never spoken. As I closed the door behind me, I understood something essential. They thought I wouldn't check, that I wouldn't remember, that I wouldn't connect the dots. They were wrong. I left that house without properly saying goodbye. Not out of anger, out of lack of air. My body felt delayed compared to what had just happened, as if it were still trying to understand at what point I had been pushed out. In the car, my hands fumbled with the keys. My heart was beating far too fast for a day that was supposed to be ordinary. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at the steering wheel, trying to organize my thoughts. I couldn't. The first thing that came wasn't anger, it was shame. A strange, unfair shame. The kind that shows up when someone exposes you as if you'd failed publicly, even when you know you didn't. Then came the exhaustion, an old, accumulated exhaustion. It wasn't from that day, it was from years of trying to be proper, discreet, balanced, years of believing that maturity meant enduring. On the drive home, everything looked normal. People walking down the street, stores open, life going on, and that infuriated me because something inside me had been broken and the world kept moving as if nothing had happened. When I got home, I sat on the couch without taking my shoes off. My body felt heavy, my head full. The word came back on its own, repeating silently as if it had stuck to me. Useless. I thought about every time I solved problems on my own, every difficult decision I made when no one wanted to take responsibility, everything I supported without applause, without recognition. And still, the word insisted. My husband arrived later. He spoke little, said I'd misunderstood, that no one meant to offend me, that I should let it go. Let it go became a warning that night. I tried to explain how I felt. He responded with logic. When someone answers pain with logic, the pain grows. That's when I realized something I'd been avoiding. He wasn't confused. He was comfortable. His silence wasn't fear, it was choice. I went to the bedroom and closed the door. For the first time in a long while, I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to smooth things over. I didn't want to fix anything right then. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, the scenes came back in fragments. The quiet laughter, the averted gaze, the ease with which they decided everything without me, the certainty that none of it had been improvised. That's when something truly scared me. It wasn't what they did, it was the possibility that I might keep allowing it. For a moment, I wondered if it wouldn't be easier to pretend nothing had happened, go back to the familiar place, avoid conflict. That old doubt tried to settle in again, but it couldn't stay. Because for the first time, I wasn't just hurt, I was alert. Still lying there, I began connecting dots, strange meetings, interrupted conversations, decisions that always arrived fully formed. Everything started to make sense far too quickly. When dawn came, I had no plan at all, but I had one clear certainty. I couldn't react the way I always had. I couldn't explain anymore. I couldn't ask for understanding. Something had changed inside me. I still didn't know what I would do, but I knew exactly what I would never do again. And that, even in the middle of fear, gave me a new sense of control. I didn't wake up determined to investigate. I woke up restless. It wasn't ordinary anxiety. It was the uncomfortable feeling that I had let too many things slide for far too long. like when you revisit an old memory and suddenly it changes shape. The first clues came from memories, small, seemingly harmless situations that I had always justified, meetings I wasn't part of, conversations that started when I left the room, decisions that were already settled when I asked something simple. I began to observe more closely, not to confront, to understand. I noticed how my name was said, short, incomplete, sometimes avoided altogether. I noticed the excessive care when they spoke to me, as if I were too fragile to handle certain subjects. I noticed how naturally they talked about me, in front of me, without truly including me. The jokes started to take shape, always the same ones, always aimed at the same target, always ending with someone saying I took things too seriously. I thought about the times I'd been excluded so I wouldn't worry, about documents that started circulating away from my hands, about financial matters treated as too technical for me, even when I had been directly involved in building them. None of this had started now. I decided to test something simple. I stopped finishing sentences for them. I stopped smoothing things over. I waited, and the silence that followed was revealing. When I didn't help, they stumbled. When I didn't soften things, discomfort appeared. That's where the pattern became clearest. I started taking notes, not as accusations, as records, dates, situations, repeated phrases, nothing emotional, just facts. One specific memory came back sharply, an old lunch where they commented on an important purchase. I asked a direct, technical question. Someone answered, "That's already been handled between us." At the time, I smiled. Today, that sentence weighs heavy. I also began watching the looks, the quick, almost automatic ones when I entered a room, conversations that changed subject, voices lowered. That doesn't happen by accident. Little by little, I understood there was a ready-made narrative about me, a convenient version, the woman who's too sensitive, the wife who doesn't understand practical matters, useful when she fixes things, disposable when she questions them. Admitting that hurt. It hurt because I realized how much I myself had helped sustain that version. Every time I stayed quiet to avoid friction, every time I thought it's not worth it, every time I chose immediate peace instead of real space. They never asked how I handled things, never wanted to understand, because understanding would give me a voice, and a voice changes hierarchy. The investigation didn't bring immediate relief, it brought responsibility. Because the clearer the pattern became, the less I could pretend I didn't see it. I still didn't have concrete proof, but I had something irreversible: awareness. And awareness changes how you enter a room, changes how you listen, changes how you stay silent. I closed my notes that night with an uncomfortable certainty. This wasn't going to be solved with conversation or goodwill or explanation. If I wanted to change my place there, I would need to understand the entire system, and I had just taken the first step. I didn't look for help. Someone let it slip. It happened at a gathering that was too ordinary to draw attention. The same table, the same chairs, the predictable conversations. Everything looked the same, and precisely because of that, I was alert. At a certain point, someone made a joke, the kind that always came up when they wanted to diminish me without sounding aggressive. The laughter came automatically from almost everyone, but not from her. She stayed silent. It was quick, too small to turn into a scene, but I saw it. While the others laughed, she looked at her glass, then at me. She didn't hold my gaze. It was almost an apology that couldn't be spoken out loud. That cut through me more than any open defense. Minutes later, when someone tried to change the subject too quickly, she was the one who introduced a new topic, awkwardly. An abrupt cut. Anyone not paying attention wouldn't notice. I did. As we were leaving, she came closer. Didn't say anything important. Commented on traffic, on the heat, on safe topics. But her body said something else. Tense shoulders, a voice that was too low, excessive caution. Before leaving, she said, almost without looking at me, "Sometimes people cross the line." That was it. It wasn't defense. It wasn't an excuse. It was recognition, and recognition in that environment was risk. After that day, I started observing who laughed and who merely went along, who repeated things and who stayed quiet. Not everyone there agreed with what was happening. Some had simply learned that disagreeing came at a cost, and that changes everything. A few days later, I received a short message from her. Nothing explicit, nothing that could be used against anyone. A loose comment about an old situation, followed by a simple sentence. That was never fair. She didn't mention names, didn't go into details, but she confirmed something essential. It wasn't an exaggeration on my part. It never was. She didn't bring proof, she didn't bring a plan, she brought validation. And in that moment, that was more powerful than any confrontation. At the same time, I felt the weight of responsibility. Anyone who validates also exposes themselves. That's why everything came in minimal doses, sentences that could later be denied, gestures that left no trace. I didn't push, I didn't ask for more. I respected her limit and mine. But something changed for good inside me. Until then, part of me still wondered if I was reading too much into it, if I was being too sensitive, if I was exaggerating. After that look, that short sentence, that restrained message, that doubt lost its grip. I wasn't alone. I was waking up. They still thought I was withdrawn, shaken, trying to process what had happened. In reality, I was adjusting my focus. Because when someone breaks the silence, even for a few seconds, the entire system starts to crack. And I knew that was only the beginning.
I chose the moment carefully. It wasn't impulse. It wasn't an explosion. It was when everyone was together, comfortable enough to imagine nothing would go off script. The conversation flowed easily. Easy laughter, light comments, that safe atmosphere that only exists when no one expects to be challenged. At a certain point, the joke came. The usual tone, the familiar target. I took a deep breath and spoke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize. I simply said that kind of comment had crossed a line. A short, direct sentence. No long accusations. No visible emotion. The effect was immediate. She smiled first, a trained, almost automatic smile. Said I was exaggerating, that it was a joke, that I had been too sensitive lately. Someone else added that I was creating unnecessary tension, that no one meant to hurt me, that I needed to relax. Let it go showed up again. It always does when someone wants everything to stay exactly the same. I tried to continue, said important decisions had been made without me, that I had been excluded from conversations that directly affected my life, that it wasn't perception, it was a pattern. I didn't finish. I was interrupted with false kindness, the kind of interruption that sounds like care, but serves to silence you. They said I was mixing things up, that it wasn't the right time, that I should talk to my husband later. Later, again. I looked at him. He stayed neutral, a serious face, hands still. He neither agreed with me nor defended me. That neutrality landed like dead weight between us. In that moment, I lost something. It wasn't their respect. That had already been wearing thin. It was my last expectation of protection. The conversation moved on as if nothing had happened. A passing comment, a new topic. Someone got up to get coffee.
The group reorganized itself too quickly, like erasing a mark from a board. I stayed seated, whole but exposed. A sentence lingered in the air, delivered in a tone that was too calm. "You've been very emotional lately." That was the symbolic punishment. Within minutes, I became the problem, not the exclusion, not the words said earlier, me. I felt that familiar sensation of being put back in place without anyone needing to raise their voice. That's how it's done. They don't attack you directly, they make you seem inappropriate for reacting. When the gathering ended, no one tried to reach out. No message later, no request to talk. The message had been delivered. It was a small defeat, but a clear one. And strangely, it brought me something new. I saw the mechanism working from the inside, saw how they interrupt, how they minimize, how they isolate, saw how emotional balance is used as a weapon against anyone who tries to take a stand. And I understood something essential. Speaking in that environment, in that way, would never work. Not because I was wrong, but because the game wasn't about reason, it was about control. I lost that confrontation, and they thought they had won. What they didn't realize is that by silencing me, they taught me exactly where I should no longer speak. And that changed everything.
I noticed it in a small sentence, the kind that passes too quickly for anyone who isn't paying attention. We were all together again. Nothing looked different at first glance. Ordinary conversation, controlled environment. At a certain point, someone mentioned a recent decision using only my husband's name, as always. But that time, something felt off. It was too automatic, too natural. My name didn't appear, my last name even less. That wasn't distraction, it was habit. I started paying attention with almost clinical focus. When they talked about decisions, assets, future, my name disappeared completely. When they talked about tasks, support, presence, I existed again. It was as if there were two versions of me, the legal one, who signs, and the social one, who can be erased. I remembered old documents, contracts, records, things I had always handled carefully. My last name was there, clearly visible, unavoidable. But in conversation, it vanished as if it were inconvenient. At one point, someone said something that sounded harmless. That's already been settled in the family's name. Family, singular, masculine. That's when everything aligned. They weren't just disrespecting me, they were removing me from the narrative. Not because I lacked importance, but because I had too much of it. My last name represented connection, rights, legitimacy, and that interfered with the silent control they had been exercising. I spent days connecting dots. Old situations took on new meaning, the excessive care not to mention me, the quick corrections when someone almost said my full name, the way they deflected when I brought up formal matters. None of it was spontaneous. They had learned to reduce me to the role that suited them best, present but not decisive, useful but not central. There was no confrontation in that moment, no visible outrage. I simply registered it. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to explain anything. I felt precision. I knew exactly where the loose thread was. The last name wasn't a detail, it was the key. And if they made such an effort to forget it, it was because it supported far more than it seemed. That night, lying in bed, I didn't think about emotional responses. I thought about documents. I thought about dates. I thought about everything that existed outside of conversation and that they pretended didn't exist. They still thought the game was emotional, but I had just understood it had always been technical. And when you understand the true ground of a dispute, the pain changes places. It becomes clarity. After I understood the real weight of my last name, I stopped looking at them.
I started looking at myself, not with guilt, with precision. I began revisiting my own history without the filter of coexistence. What I had built before that marriage, what I maintained after, the decisions I took on when no one else wanted to take on anything. I was always called when there was a problem, never when there was recognition. I mentally listed everything I had supported, not just money, structure, continuity, stability. I was the fixed point while everyone else fluctuated, and that never showed up in conversations because showing up would put me in a position of strength. I realized how strategic my silence had been, how much I resolved without noise, how much conflict I avoided thinking it would protect me. In practice, I was protecting their comfort. They never asked how I did things, never wanted to understand, because understanding would require admitting dependence, and dependence changes hierarchy. I started observing their behavior when I mentioned something concrete, an old payment, a signature, a technical detail. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The subject was closed. Someone always said they'd talk to me later. Later never came. At that point, my husband began to reveal himself in a different way, not as a villain, as a beneficiary. As long as I stayed discreet, he didn't have to take a stand. As long as I was erased, he didn't have to share space. That realization didn't come with anger, it came with lucidity. I stopped asking why this was happening. I started asking how the system sustained itself, who pulled the strings, who agreed, who stayed silent to avoid exposure. I realized there was an almost elegant logic at work. They praised me in private when they needed me. They diminished me in group settings when I threatened balance. It wasn't impulse, it was calculation. The more I saw, the less desire I had to react emotionally. I didn't need to prove my worth anymore. I needed to understand the map. I began cross-referencing information, old conversations, dates, situations where my name had been strategically omitted. Everything pointed to the same place. They had built a convenient version of me so they could decide without resistance. And the most ironic part is that they could only do this because I had always been too responsible to explode, too mature to shout, too rational to fight. They mistook that for weakness. In that moment, something shifted for good. Pain stopped being the center, focus took over. I no longer wanted recognition. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want emotional explanations. I wanted repositioning. And repositioning is not begged for, it is built, step by step.
He didn't reach out to me out of courage. He reached out of fear. The message was short, almost neutral. He asked if we could talk about something old. He didn't explain further. We met outside their environment, a simple place where no one pays attention to anyone. When he sat across from me, it took him a while to speak. He fidgeted with his glass, looked around, the body language of someone who knows they're crossing an invisible line. I waited. He started by saying he didn't want trouble, that he didn't want to create conflict, that it wasn't personal. That long introduction already said everything. Then he took a deep breath and said, "This didn't start now." He didn't use my name, he used this, as if naming it were dangerous. He said the conversations about me had always existed, never directly, always framed as concern. Comments about me being too sensitive, too emotional, not practical enough. Nothing offensive enough to provoke confrontation. Everything calculated. Then he said something that froze me inside. The word useless has been used before, not that day. That confirmed everything. He talked about decisions made before I ever knew, documents discussed without me,
the constant care not to include me to avoid stress. He repeated phrases that were clearly not his own. When he mentioned my husband, he lowered his voice, said he had always known, that he preferred not to get involved, that he didn't think it was that serious. That was the most honest sentence of all. Before leaving, he said something short and direct, looking at me for the first time. They think you won't do anything because you never have. That was the risk, because for a moment, I felt fear, real fear, not of them, of myself, of the possibility of continuing exactly as always, even knowing everything. I thanked him. I didn't ask for details. I didn't promise silence or action. He seemed relieved to have spoken, but frightened by what it might mean. When he left, I stayed seated for a few minutes. My heart was beating faster. There was no shock. There was a decision forming, and that's what's frightening. I understood then that there was no going back because now I knew too much. It wasn't just a pattern. It wasn't just perception. It was confirmation. They were still playing the same game, but I was no longer in the same place. And in that moment, alone at that table, I knew if I did nothing, I would be choosing to remain invisible. And that choice, I was no longer willing to make. Emotional dramatic. This time, I didn't wait for a favorable mood. I waited for a real moment. It happened during a conversation that seemed simple, with no scheduled meeting, no prior announcement. Precisely because of that, they were relaxed, confident, assuming I would still react the way I always had. I brought it up directly. I asked why certain decisions were still being made without me, not in an accusatory tone, in a technical one, like someone who already knows the answer and wants to hear the official justification. The air changed instantly. She reacted first, said I was insisting on something already resolved, that I was stuck in the past, that this was getting tiresome. Tiresome for whom? I mentioned facts, specific situations, dates, not opinions, not feelings, concrete things. That's when the conversation hardened. They said I was being too suspicious, that I was creating problems where none existed, that my behavior was wearing the family down, a clear attempt to paint me as unstable. My husband tried to intervene, said maybe I was taking things too personally, that no one intended to exclude me. I looked at him calmly, a calm that didn't match what they expected. I said only this: exclusion doesn't require intent, it requires practice. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable like the others, it was tense. Someone got up to get water, someone else checked their phone. The system had been touched in a sensitive spot. They tried to change the subject, I didn't follow. I asked directly why my last name was never mentioned, why decisions were announced using only his name, why documents circulated without passing through me. The reaction was immediate and far too defensive for people with nothing to hide. They said I was seeing things that weren't there, that I was paranoid, that I needed rest, that I'd been too sensitive. The gaslighting came in full force, but this time it didn't work. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't apologize. I didn't try to soften anything. I said I wasn't asking for permission. I was informing that this way of operating would no longer be accepted by me. That caused real discomfort. She lost her smile, her tone rose. She said I was threatening family harmony, that I should think about the consequences of what I was doing. That's when it became clear. When they can't diminish you, they try to scare you. I stood up before the conversation turned into a spectacle, not to flee, to maintain control. I said the conversation was over for me at that moment. As I walked out, I heard someone say that I had changed, that I wasn't the same person anymore. For the first time, that didn't sound like criticism. It sounded like a statement of fact. Did I lose something in that confrontation? Yes. I lost the illusion that there was still room for emotional negotiation, but I gained something definitive. They understood that I was no longer trying to be understood. I was setting a boundary. And once a boundary is set, the entire dynamic changes.
After that confrontation, I stopped talking, and it wasn't exhaustion, it was a choice. I understood that any explanation would be used against me, that any attempt at conversation would turn into another argument to paint me as emotional. So I did what I had always done best, but now with clear intention. I observed. I started arriving earlier, leaving later, listening more than responding. My silence stopped being uncomfortable and became neutral. They thought they had won, that I had backed down. That's when they started making mistakes. I went back to old documents, stored contracts, records I had always kept out of organization, not suspicion. Now, every paper carried a different weight, a different purpose. I began noticing objective patterns, dates when decisions were made without me, subtle changes in names, representations, signatures. Nothing blatantly illegal, everything carefully pushed out of my line of sight. I documented everything, without emotion, without judgment, just facts. A map being built patiently. My husband noticed my silence. He tried a few neutral approaches, vague questions, casual comments. I answered only what was necessary, not out of coldness, out of focus. At times, fear surfaced, not fear of them, fear of going too far. There was one night when I sat alone, papers spread out, and wondered if it wouldn't be easier to stop, to pretend none of it existed, to return to the familiar place where I was ignored but not confronted. That idea didn't last long, because I realized something simple. If I backed down now, it wouldn't be for peace, it would be out of fear. And I had lived that way long enough. So I continued. I also started observing how they behaved when they thought I wasn't paying attention. They talked more, relaxed too much, confirmed things without noticing. Small details slipped, and I recorded them. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't correct versions. I gave no signals. Strategic silence has a curious effect. It makes the other side reveal itself. And they did. I organized everything that was directly connected to my name, my last name, my history, what they insisted on erasing socially but couldn't erase formally. It wasn't a plan of attack, it was a plan of presence. I didn't want to expose anyone out of revenge. I just wanted the truth to appear in the place where they had always held control. And when truth appears on its own, without accusation, without shouting, it carries more weight. The plan wasn't to speak louder, it was to let the structure speak for me. And when I finished organizing everything, I knew the right moment wouldn't need to be created. It would come. The moment wasn't announced, and that's why it worked. We were all together again, an encounter formal enough not to be casual, casual enough not to seem important. They were relaxed, confident, talking loudly, laughing, making decisions the way they always had. Until my last name appeared. It didn't come from my mouth. Someone from outside the family asked a simple question, technical, direct, about a specific document, something that required immediate confirmation. Someone answered using only my husband's name, as always. And then came the correction, dry, precise. No, that's under Elena Duarte's name. My full name, with my last name. The room changed. It was physical. I saw it. Shoulders stiffened, eyes crossed too quickly, laughter died mid-breath. The air grew heavy.
Someone tried to correct it, said there must be a mistake, that it was being handled internally. The person insisted, asked to see the document. I opened my bag. I didn't announce anything. I didn't ask for attention. I simply placed the paper on the table. Open, visible. Date, signature, registration. My last name was there, clear, undeniable. The silence that followed was no longer comfortable. It was contained panic. She tried to speak. Her voice faltered, said that wasn't the subject of the moment, that it was out of context. But the context had already been exposed. More questions came, simple, technical, irrefutable, and each answer dismantled, piece by piece, the narrative they had sustained for years. My husband stayed still. For the first time, he didn't try to neutralize, didn't try to soften. He was seeing, along with them, the real effect of omission. Someone commented, almost without realizing it, that certain decisions couldn't have been made without my signature. Another noticed that my name had been removed from previous conversations. None of that came from me. It came from the room. That's how a system collapses, when it exposes itself without anyone needing to accuse. Their confidence wavered, not because I shouted, but because I was there, whole, formally present, impossible to erase. That same day, the tone shifted. Words became cautious, decisions were paused, control had been broken. When they addressed me, they used my full name with exaggerated care. Too late. I didn't respond immediately, not out of contempt, but because in that moment I had already been seen where it truly mattered. They never forgot my last name. They just pretended it didn't exist. And now everyone knew why. After that day, nothing went back to how it was before. But nothing turned into a spectacle either. The changes didn't come with apologies or emotional conversations. They came the way they always do when power shifts, discreetly, carefully, almost timidly. The tone of conversations dropped. Decisions started being announced beforehand, not after they were already made. My name began to appear, always complete, always with a care that hadn't existed before. The effort was visible, not out of genuine respect, but out of awareness of limits. They didn't need to admit anything out loud. Their behavior said everything. Where there had once been jokes, there was now silence. Where there had been carelessness, there was now caution. My husband took longer. In the first few days, he tried to act as if nothing had happened. Then came neutral, measured conversations, almost bureaucratic. Until one night, too ordinary to become a scene, he spoke. He said he hadn't realized how much I'd been left out, that it was never intentional, that things had gotten out of hand. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I said something simple without raising my voice. Intention doesn't erase impact. And neutrality, when it always weighs on the same side, is also a choice. He went quiet, a different kind of silence, one without a ready argument. In the days that followed, something shifted, not out of emotional transformation, but necessity. When my name was omitted, he corrected it. When decisions surfaced without me, he interrupted. It wasn't passionate defense, it was late positioning. And that was enough. The system reacted the way systems always do when they lose control, with false cordiality and excessive care. Words were measured, looks were controlled. The space that had once been denied to me was now granted, not out of generosity, but consequence. I didn't provoke. I didn't demand recognition. I didn't seek validation. I occupied. I spoke when necessary. I decided when it was my place to decide. I signed what had always been my right to sign, without asking permission, without explaining beyond what was necessary. At one point, someone tried to bring back the old tone, a sideways comment, almost automatic. The silence that followed was immediate. No one laughed, no one followed along. The system had learned. I understood something important then. Justice doesn't always come with apologies or public confessions. Sometimes it comes with changed behavior, with forced care, with the silent recognition that certain things will no longer be tolerated. I didn't recover the lost time, but I recovered my place. And that, for me, was enough.
They never called me useless again. Not because they learned anything about empathy, but because they learned something about limits. My last name began to circulate carefully, always complete, always spoken before any important decision, not out of affection, out of forced recognition. And in that context, that was enough. I didn't seek acceptance. Acceptance is too fragile when it depends on other people's moods. I sought space, and space isn't asked for twice. Today, when I walk into a room, I don't need to announce anything. I don't need to remind anyone who I am or what I've done. People know, because now there are consequences when they pretend not to know. My husband changed, not in a dramatic way, not as some storybook hero. He changed because neutrality stopped being comfortable. He began to take a stand not out of sudden courage, but because the environment demanded it. And I accepted that for what it was. A late choice, but a necessary one. The family stayed who they always were. People don't change that much. What changes is the reach we allow them to have, and their reach over me ended. Sometimes someone still measures their words too carefully around me. Sometimes silence shows up again, but it's not the same silence. Before, it erased me. Now, it protects me. I go back to that day, that table, that word spoken with a quiet laugh, useless. I remember how no one defended me. I remember how my last name was ignored as if it didn't exist. And I smile, not out of revenge, but clarity. They never forgot my last name. They just hoped I would. I didn't. And maybe that's the most important part of all. This was never about proving worth. It was never about winning respect. It was about stopping others from deciding who I was without me. If you made it this far, I want to tell you something calmly. It's not too late to take up the place that was always yours. It's not too late to be seen. It's not too late to be called by your full name. If this story spoke to you, like it, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Here, no one walks alone.